We like to believe we can spot a dangerous person from a mile away. We look for the obvious signs, the loud aggression, the overt manipulation, the clear displays of narcissism. But what if the most psychologically dangerous individuals are the ones who seem the most normal, the most charming, even the most virtuous? What if the greatest threat to your mental well-being doesn't announce itself with bang, but with a whisper of concern that slowly rewrites your reality? There's a specific psychological pattern that Carl Jung identified in his most challenging patients, a warning sign so subtle that most people miss it until the damage is already done. When you learn to see this pattern, you're not just learning a piece of psychology trivia. You are acquiring a shield that can protect you from years of emotional chaos and confusion. What is this single most dangerous sign, and how can you recognize it before it traps you in someone else's psychological storm? The mechanism Jung identified as a root of this danger is called shadow projection, but the real danger isn't the projection itself. It's the absolute, unshakable conviction that accompanies it. The shadow, in Jungian terms, is everything we have repressed or denied about ourselves. It's a collection of our insecurities, our darker impulses, our perceived flaws, and our undeveloped potentials that we refuse to acknowledge. We all have a shadow, a psychological baggage we carry, but healthy individuals have a conscious relationship with it. They know it's there. The danger begins when a person is completely unconscious of their own shadow, believing themselves to be purely good, rational, or victimized. When this profound lack of self-awareness exists, the unconscious mind has to do something with all that denied content. It can't just delete it. So, it does the next best thing. It projects it outward onto other people. It's like an old-school movie projector in the mind. The person loads a film reel of their own anger, their own envy, their own manipulative tendencies, and they shine it onto the blank screen of someone else. They then react not to the person standing in front of them, but to the distorted image they have just projected. And here is the crucial point. They do not experience this as a perception or an interpretation. They experience it as objective reality, a truth as solid and real as the ground beneath their feet. This isn't just a simple misunderstanding or a difference of opinion. It's a fundamental breakdown in perceiving reality. The person projecting their shadow isn't consciously lying when they accuse you of being selfish or plotting against them. In their mind, it is an undeniable fact because their brain is literally filtering reality through the lens of their disowned traits. Modern neuroscience gives us a chilling insight into this process. Research, like that from Stanford's Dr. Robert Sapolsky, shows that when our brains are in a state of high emotional stress or conviction, our prefrontal cortex, the rational, logical part of our brain, can be significantly impaired. The emotional centers, like the amygdala, take over, and we start processing information not based on evidence, but on what feels true. For the shadow projector, their projected reality feels intensely true, and any evidence to the contrary is dismissed as a trick, a manipulation, or further proof of your deceit. This is what creates what psychologists call a reality distortion field. It's a bubble of subjective belief so powerful it can bend the perceptions of those around it. The projector's unwavering certainty is magnetic. They don't just misperceive you, they begin to unconsciously recruit others into their distorted view. They will speak of you with such conviction, often cloaked in the language of concern or disappointment, that others start to question their own judgment. They'll say things like, "I'm worried about him, there's a real darkness there," or "I just have a bad feeling about her intentions." They are so convincing because they genuinely believe their own narrative. They are the star of a movie in which they are the perpetual victim and you are being cast as a villain, and they are now selling tickets to everyone they know. Let me tell you about a man I once knew. We'll call him Arthur. Arthur was one of the most charismatic and seemingly empathetic people in our social circle. He was a master storyteller, always ready with a supportive word, and he had a way of making you feel like the most important person in the room. But over time, a strange pattern began to emerge. Whenever a friendship or professional relationship in his life soured, the story was always the same. The other person, without fail, had turned out to be a deeply manipulative narcissist who had betrayed his trust. He would describe their behavior in meticulous, convincing detail, painting a picture of calculated cruelty. At first, we all sympathized with him. How could one person have such bad luck with people? We saw him as a trusting soul in a world of predators. But then one of us, a close friend of his, was the next to be excommunicated. Suddenly, This person we had known for years as kind and reliable was being described by Arthur with the exact same language. He was now a covert manipulator, a backstabber, someone who had been using him all along. We were confused because this description didn't match the person we knew at all. But Arthur's conviction was absolute. He presented tiny, innocuous events as evidence of a grand conspiracy against him. A missed call was proof of intentional disrespect. A differing opinion was a sign of a deep-seated desire to undermine him. What was happening was a textbook case of mass shadow projection. Arthur was profoundly insecure and terrified of his own ambitious and competitive impulses. He couldn't accept these traits in himself, so his mind projected them onto his closest colleagues and friends, especially those who were achieving some measure of success. He wasn't just mistaken. He was living in an alternate reality where he was a pure-hearted victim surrounded by Machiavellian schemers. The most devastating part was watching him recruit others. His certainty was so potent that it made people doubt their own perceptions. He was so good at his role that he managed to isolate his targets, turning part of their own social network against them, all while maintaining his flawless image as a wounded party. Recognizing this pattern years later was like turning on a light in a dark room full of distorted mirrors. To protect yourself, you need to be able to identify the specific warning signs. The first, and most important, is absolute certainty about other people's internal states. They don't say, "I felt hurt when you did that," which is a healthy expression of feeling. Instead, they say, "You did a asterisk to hurt asterisk me," or "You are a manipulative person." They speak as if they have a direct, infallible insight into your deepest motivations and character, and their pronouncements are not open to discussion. They are presented as verdicts. When you hear this kind of definitive, mind-reading language, a red flag should go up immediately. Healthy people understand that they can only ever know their own experience. They can't know with certainty what is happening inside someone else. The second sign is a complete immunity to contradictory evidence. You can present them with facts, text messages, eyewitness accounts, or logical explanations, and it will make no difference. In fact, your attempt to clarify the situation will often be twisted into further proof of their narrative. If you defend yourself calmly, you're being cold and calculating. If you get upset, you're unstable in proving their point. They have constructed a psychological fortress around their projection, and your evidence is seen not as information, but as an attack. This is a hallmark of a closed cognitive loop. Their conclusion is predetermined, and all new data is forcefully shaped to fit that conclusion. It's a deeply frustrating and maddening experience to be on the receiving end of this. The third indicator is an emotional intensity that is wildly disproportionate to the actual event. They will have a massive, explosive reaction to a perceived slight that most people would find minor or even non-existent. For example, you might reschedule a coffee meeting for a legitimate reason, and they will react as if you are committed a profound act of personal betrayal. This intense emotional charge is a key. The energy doesn't come from your action. It comes from the unconscious shadow content that your action has triggered. You have become a symbol for something much larger and older within their own psyche, and you are now bearing the brunt of an emotional reaction that has little to do with you. The fourth sign is a consistent presence of a victim narrative. In every conflict, every failed relationship, every workplace drama, there are always the innocent party who was wronged. The cast of characters in their life may change, but their role as a victim remains constant. When you hear someone tell story after story of being betrayed, misunderstood, and persecuted by a long line of different people, you have to start wondering what the common denominator is. While genuine victimization certainly exists, a person trapped in shadow projection is the unconscious architect of their own recurring dramas. Their projection creates a very conflicts that then justify their feeling of being victimized in a self-perpetuating cycle. The fifth and final sign is recruitment behavior. They will actively, though often subtly, try to get other people to see you through their distorted lens. This is rarely done through open slander. It's usually framed as a request for advice or an expression of concern. They'll approach a mutual friend and say something like, "I'm really worried about Jane. Have you noticed how secretive she's become? I just want to make sure she's okay." They are planting seeds of doubt and suspicion, slowly poisoning the well of your reputation. This recruitment is essential for them because it validates their projection. If they can get others to agree with their distorted view, it no longer feels like a subjective perception. It feels like an objective, shared reality. When you see these 5 signs working in concert, you are not dealing with a simple personality clash. You are witnessing a powerful, unconscious psychological mechanism at work, and it is imperative that you recognize it for what it is. It's crucial to understand that shadow projection doesn't happen all at once. It follows a predictable and escalatory pattern. At stage 1, you get the initial projection. These are subtle comments or accusations that feel slightly off. They might attribute an emotion to you that you're not feeling or a motive that makes no sense. At this stage, it's easy to dismiss these as simple misunderstandings and brush them aside. You give them the benefit of the doubt. Stage 2 is when conviction crystallizes. The projections become more frequent and are delivered with more certainty. Your attempts to correct them are met with resistance. They stop being curious about your perspective and start being certain about their own. This is a critical juncture. It's the point where you must recognize that you are not dealing with a communication problem, but a perception problem. If you fail to recognize this, you will proceed to the next, more dangerous stages. Stage 3 is a full-blown reality distortion. The projector now interprets everything you do through the filter of their projection. If you are quiet, you are scheming. If you are friendly, you are being manipulative. Your neutral actions are no longer seen as neutral. They are scanned for evidence that confirms a negative narrative. You begin to feel like you are walking on eggshells because any action you take can and will be used against you. This is where the profound gaslighting begins, and you might start to question your own reality and intentions. Then comes stage 4, social recruitment. Having solidified the narrative in their own mind, they now begin to externalize it. They start sharing their concerns about you with colleagues, friends, or family members. They are building a coalition, not consciously, but driven by an unconscious need to have their reality validated. They are creating an echo chamber that will reinforce a distorted view and isolate you from your support system. Stage 5 is what Jung called collective possession. The recruitment has been successful. A group of people now sees you through a projector's lens. You start to feel a shift in the social dynamics. People who were once warm and friendly become distant or suspicious. You are now fighting a battle against a perception that has taken on a life of its own, and you may not even know its source. This is an incredibly isolating and psychologically damaging experience. The final stage is systematic exclusion. The group, now united by the shared projection, begins to actively or passively exclude you. You might be left out of meetings, social gatherings, or important conversations. In a work environment, this can lead to being mobbed or fired. In a family, it can lead to becoming the scapegoat or the black sheep. You have been successfully ejected from the system, not based on anything you have actually done, but because you became the screen for one person's unacknowledged shadow. Understanding the 6-stage progression is vital. The only way to win is to recognize the game at stage 2 and refuse to play. However, shadow projection is not the only subtle danger Jung warned about. An even more insidious state is what he called ego inflation. While the shadow projector is unconsciously destructive, the inflated individual is consciously convinced of their own righteousness and superiority, making them blind to their own shadow. Ego inflation occurs when a person's ego identifies with an archetype, a powerful, universal pattern from a collective unconscious. They don't just have a good idea, they become possessed by the archetype of the truth-bearer. They don't just want to help people, they become the savior. These individuals are often incredibly charismatic. Their absolute certainty can be mistaken for wisdom, and their grand vision can inspire devotion. Unlike a typical narcissist who brags about their own accomplishments, the inflated individual often presents as humble, claiming to be merely a vessel for some higher truth, a divine will, or a revolutionary ideology. This apparent selflessness makes them far more dangerous because people willingly grant them authority. The warning signs are subtle. They never, ever doubt their own motivations. They may admit to small, tactical mistakes, but they are psychologically incapable of questioning the fundamental rightness of their own cause or their own heart. Any form of questioning or disagreement is not seen as a valid perspective to consider, but as a moral or spiritual failing on your part. You are not just wrong, you are unenlightened, resistant, or even evil. Let me tell you another story, this one about a woman I'll call Elena. Elena founded a wellness community that started with beautiful, noble intentions. She was brilliant, articulate, and radiated an aura of profound peace and wisdom. People were drawn to her. She spoke about authenticity, healing, and building a conscious community. In the beginning, it was wonderful. But over time, a subtle shift occurred. Elena's teachings became less about universal principles and more about Elena's unique interpretation of those principles. She began to talk about her downloads, her divine guidance, and the special destiny of her community. The first sign of trouble was how she handled dissent. If someone questioned a decision, she wouldn't engage with the substance of their argument. Instead, she would look at them with a kind of sad pity and say something like, "I can feel the fear in your heart. You're not ready to receive this truth yet." The questioner was immediately reframed as psychologically or spiritually deficient. The group dynamic became centered around pleasing Elena and demonstrating one's loyalty to her vision. She became possessed by the archetype of the wise guru, and the ego inflation was total. She believed her will and the will of the universe were one and the same. The community eventually imploded. Elena's inability to accept any feedback or adapt to changing circumstances led to a series of disastrous financial and interpersonal decisions. She demanded absolute loyalty, and when things went wrong, she blamed the negative energy of those who had doubted her. She left behind a trail of emotionally and financially broken people who had bought into her inflated vision. Elena wasn't a con artist in the traditional sense. She was a true believer, and that is what made her so profoundly dangerous. She had identified her personal ego with a transpersonal, archetypal energy, and the psychic tension eventually caused a catastrophic collapse, taking a whole community down with it. A third dangerous sign Jung identified is complete identification with the persona. The persona is a social mask we all wear. It's the version of ourselves we present to the world to be seen as competent, friendly, and acceptable. It's a necessary tool for social navigation. The danger arises when a person mistakes the mask for their actual face. They invest all their psychic energy into maintaining a flawless, socially perfect exterior, losing all connection to their authentic self, their vulnerabilities, and, crucially, their shadow. This creates what Jung called the perfect person problem. On the surface, these individuals are models of social grace. They are the perfect employee, the perfect neighbor, the perfect parent. They never say the wrong thing, never appear flustered, never have a bad day. But this perfection is a facade, and it conceals a terrifying void. When you are with them, despite the technical correctness of their interactions, you may feel a strange sense of hollowness, as if you are interacting with a beautifully programmed automaton rather than a real human being. The real danger here lies in what is being repressed. All the messy, chaotic, human parts of them, their anger, their envy, their frustrations, are not gone. They are being compressed in the unconscious, building pressure like steam in a sealed boiler. The warning sign is their extreme, disproportionate reaction to any perceived threat to their perfect image. If you challenge their competence, question their narrative, or expose a tiny flaw, they will react with ferocity that is shocking. It's as if you haven't just criticized them, you have threatened their very existence. And because all that shadow energy has been repressed for so long, when it finally erupts, it is often chaotic and incredibly destructive. The perfect manager suddenly has a public meltdown. The model spouse is discovered to have a secret life. The more perfect the persona, the more demonic the shadow that lies beneath it, and the more dangerous its eventual, inevitable explosion. Perhaps the most unsettling sign Jung described is what he called archetypal possession. This goes beyond ego inflation or persona identification. This is when an individual's personal ego is completely overwhelmed and displaced by an archetypal energy. The person you knew seems to disappear, replaced by something ancient, impersonal, and powerful. Their voice might change, their posture might shift, their eyes might take on a different quality. They are no longer a person having an experience. They are the experience itself. They have become a vessel for a raw, transpersonal force. You might see someone become possessed by the archetype of the eternal victim, their entire being organized around suffering and eliciting pity and rescue. Or they might be possessed by the righteous warrior, fighting cosmic battles against an evil that only they can perceive, seeing enemies and conspirators everywhere. Or they could be possessed by the divine parent, treating other capable adults as helpless children who need their constant guidance and control. The person in this state experiences a profound sense of purpose and certainty. All the normal doubts and ambiguities of human life vanish, replaced by the absolute conviction of their archetypal role. This can be incredibly persuasive to others who are looking for certainty in a confusing world. The danger of archetypal possession lies in the fact that archetypes are bipolar. They contain both light and shadow, creation and destruction. The same archetypal energy that produces a saint can also produce a fanatic. A person possessed by the Savior will inevitably manifest the shadow of the tyrant, seeking to control those they claim to be saving. A person possessed by the Judge will eventually manifest the shadow of the cruel persecutor. Because their personal ego has been sidelined, they have no capacity to moderate or integrate these powerful energies. They are at the mercy of the archetype, and they will commit acts completely contrary to their unconscious values, often with no memory or with elaborate rationalizations for their behavior afterward. A final, and deeply insidious, sign is a compulsion to repeat. This is an unconscious pattern where an individual obsessively recreates the same painful life situations over and over again, all while believing themselves to be a passive victim of fate or bad luck. They are the person who always ends up with partners who abandon them, bosses who exploit them, or friends who betray them. The specific people change, but the script remains hauntingly the same. They seem genuinely bewildered each time the drama repeats, blind to the fact that they are the unconscious author of their own recurring tragedy. This might seem less directly dangerous than the other signs, but the peril lies in being recruited into their psychological drama. People trapped in a repetition compulsion unconsciously send out signals that attract others who are perfectly suited to play the co-starring roles in their unresolved story. Without realizing it, you can find yourself cast as a betrayer, the abandoner, or the persecutor in a play that began long before you ever entered the stage. Jung believed that the unconscious has a powerful ability to orchestrate events in the outer world to match our inner state. You will find yourself behaving in ways that are out of character for you, subtly provoked and maneuvered into fulfilling their unconscious prophecy. Then, when the inevitable painful ending occurs, they can say, "See, it happened again. Everyone always leaves me," completely blind to how they set the stage for your exit. So, now that you can recognize these deeply dangerous psychological patterns, how do you protect yourself? Jung's protocol is not about confrontation or trying to fix the other person. It is about conscious awareness and strong, immediate boundary enforcement. The first step is to trust your internal reality. If someone's perception of you consistently and dramatically contradicts your own experience of yourself, trust your gut. Your internal experience is your most reliable compass. Do not let their certainty override your sanity. The second step is to completely abandon any attempt to convince them they are wrong. You cannot use logic to reason with someone who is not in a logical state. Trying to convince a shadow projector, an inflated individual, or a possessed person is like arguing with a movie screen. Your words will pass right through them or, worse, be incorporated into their script as further evidence of your villainy. This is not a debate you can win. Disengage from the argument. Step 3 is to create an information diet. Do not share your vulnerabilities, your doubts, or your personal struggles with these individuals. Any information you give them can and will be twisted to fit their pre-existing narrative. Be polite, be cordial, but be a gray rock. Make your interactions with them as boring and uninformative as possible. The less fuel you give their psychological fire, the better. The fourth step is to document reality. Keep a private record of interactions, conversations, and events. When you are being systematically gaslit, your own memory can begin to feel unreliable. Having a written record can be an anchor for your sanity, reminding you of what actually happened and what was actually said. This is not about building a legal case. It is about protecting your own perception of reality from being eroded. Step 5 is to seek an outside perspective, but do so wisely. Talk to trusted friends or professionals who are outside the immediate social system, and thus outside the projector's reality distortion field. Explain what is happening and check your perceptions with them. This can break the profound isolation that is a key weapon in this kind of psychological warfare. It will remind you that you are not crazy and that your reality is valid. Finally, the sixth and most important step is to be willing to withdraw. Sometimes, the only winning move is not to play the game. If a person consistently displays these dangerous signs and is unwilling or unable to engage in any form of self-reflection, strategic withdrawal may be your only option for self-preservation. This might mean ending a friendship, changing jobs, or creating significant distance in a family relationship. This is not an act of weakness. It is an act of profound psychological strength and self-respect. Think back to Arthur, the charismatic man who saw narcissists everywhere. His projections weren't random. They were a sophisticated defense mechanism designed to protect him from confronting his own ambition and envy. He couldn't bear to see those qualities in himself, so his unconscious mind outsourced them, plastering them onto others so he could maintain his self-image as a pure, trusting victim. This is the ultimate tragedy of the unconscious projector. In their desperate flight from their own shadow, they end up becoming the very thing they condemn, acting out the very behaviors they attribute to others, all while wrapped in a cocoon of self-righteous ignorance. Jung dedicated his life to mapping these treacherous territories of the human mind, not to make us paranoid, but to make us free. Freedom from being manipulated by forces we don't understand. Freedom from being ensnared in projection fields that warp our sense of self. Freedom from being unconsciously cast in other people's psychological dramas. The single most dangerous psychological sign isn't just one thing. It's a toxic combination of complete unconsciousness of one's own darkness, coupled with absolute, unshakable conviction in one's perceptions of others. When you encounter someone who embodies this pattern, remember Jung's profound insight. The most terrifying and the most necessary thing is to accept oneself completely. People who cannot do this will inevitably turn you into a container for all the parts of themselves they cannot stand. Your protection doesn't lie in fighting them, in arguing with them, or in trying to change them. It lies in the quiet, unshakable strength of your own self-awareness. That consciousness is your shield, your compass, and your liberation from the most dangerous forces in human relationships. Have you ever encountered someone who fits these descriptions? Recognizing these patterns in our past can be a powerful tool for protecting our future. Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might be the validation someone else needs to trust their own reality. And if you found this exploration valuable, please like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the psychology that shapes our world. Your support helps us continue creating content that empowers conscious living. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the depths of the human psyche. Stay aware, stay conscious, and stay safe.